In this devotional, I'm going to share with you 3 thoughts from 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 5, where I'll ask the question, how did David fall into sin? Second Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 5 says, "In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon, when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, 'Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?' So David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, 'I am pregnant.'" Most of us know the story of David and Bathsheba, and most of us recognize that it is a grand failure on David's part, that he committed a great and terrible sin in taking Bathsheba and sleeping with her, and then later trying to cover it up and murdering one of his mighty men, one of his closest followers, to try and cover up his sin. But how is it that David fell into this temptation? That's what I'm going to discuss here with these 3 thoughts from 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 5. Thought number 1, neglected responsibility. In the first verse that I read, it says, "It was the time when kings go out to raid." This is the time when the kings go out to make war. And during this time, when traditionally the king would take his men out to make war, David doesn't go. David doesn't go. He neglects his responsibility, and not just his responsibility to go and lead his men into battle, but he neglects his responsibility to protect himself and others from sin. You have to remember, David is the leader of Israel, that he is the king, and he is setting the moral standard for all of the people to follow, and he neglected that great responsibility, both by refraining from going off to war and by not protecting himself from lusting after Bathsheba when the opportunity made itself apparent to him. Thought number 2, neglected courtesy. David, when he saw Bathsheba, neglected the basic courtesy of not looking away. He was looking at her and looking at her lustfully and obviously trying to figure out who she was so that way he can get her up into his house so he can sleep with her. And he neglected the expectation that anyone would have of a gentleman to turn his eyes away from that which was tempting. Now, I don't think at all that Bathsheba was trying to seduce David in any way, shape, or form. What I do think is that David, when he saw her, had a responsibility to avert his eyes, to look away, to do the courteous thing and not shame her by staring at her and being all gross and stuff. But he didn't do that. He didn't do the most basic thing of being courteous to somebody who was in a compromising situation that he was taking advantage of. Thought number 3, neglected restraint. David didn't exercise any restraint at all in this circumstance. Look at what he does. He's up on the rooftop. He sees Bathsheba. He already refrained from going off to war to be with his soldiers as he should have been. And when he sees her, he doesn't treat her with any courtesy. Instead, he looks at her, he tries to figure out who she is, and then once he finds out who she is, he has her brought up so he can sleep with her. He didn't practice any restraint whatsoever. He didn't demonstrate any fear of the Lord whatsoever. He didn't show any courtesy to her or to Uriah the Hittite or to the people of Israel or to God. He should have been showing restraint. He should have been reining in his sinful desires, but he didn't. And oh so often, this is how we fall into sin as well. We neglect our responsibility. We don't show common courtesy or do the basic morally good thing. and we don't restrain ourselves from indulging in evil practices. So what we need to do is demonstrate some restraint, to show courtesy to one another, and to live up to the many responsibilities that are placed before us. In so doing, we may be able to avert some sinful practices. These three thoughts come to you from the assigned reading of 2 Samuel, chapters 10 through 14. If you'd like to read through the Bible with me, you can do so by subscribing to this channel, by clicking on the link in the description, or by joining the Facebook group Through the Bible, where we are reading the text of Scripture together.